Concerns about the minutes? I'd entertain a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
I will make a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
Motion by Board Member Palmer. Any support?
Support.
Support by Councilwoman Leaks May. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, that motion carries. That takes us to the next item on the agenda, which is the call to audience. If there's anyone in the audience today who has anything to say to the BZA on any issue that is not on the agenda tonight, now is your opportunity. Seeing none, we'll move on to the first item we have on our regular agenda, which is consideration of 4-dimensional variances at 965 Wanda. The standard for granting a non-use variance under Michigan law is whether practical difficulties exist that would stand in the way of carrying out the strict letter of the ordinance. In order to grant a variance, the BZA must find all of the following. Strict compliance will not unreasonably prevent the owner from using the property for a permitted use. The intent and purpose of the ordinance will be observed and substantial justice will be done. A lesser variance would not give substantial relief to the owner or be more consistent with substantial justice to other property owners, and that the general requirements of Section 24-426 are met. In other words, that the proposal will not impair the supply of light or air or diminish property values, that it's compatible with the adjacent uses, that it won't unreasonably increase congestion, it won't create a nuisance, and the plight results from special or unique circumstances and not a hardship created by the applicant. A dimensional variance requires a majority vote of the board, so it needs 5 affirmative votes to pass. With that, Kyle, I'll turn this over to you to give the staff presentation. Let us know anything you have to say.
Thank you, Chair. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Kyle Bryce. I'm a planner, too. I've been working here at the city since January 3rd. So I've been to a few planning commission meetings, but this is my first time working with you all, so just nice to meet you all. This is a request by Richie Atto on behalf of the owner at 965 Wanda, LLC. So this is Zone M2, General Industrial. Included in the staff report is a map of the area. So this is down on Wanda in the southeast area of the city, a little bit north of 8 Mile. Specifically, it's between Jarvis and Wordsworth, but this property does not front on either of those. So it does have significant Wanda frontage. You may know Wanda Park is across the street. So the applicant has submitted a site plan review, and upon review, we have noted that there is a reason for a few variances, which is why we're here tonight. Just going over the existing conditions of the site, there's a large building on site. It's over 200,000 square feet. There's aluminum brass forging that operates there, and I'll let the tenant get to that a little bit later. We're here before you to seek a variance for a few items, the most pressing of which is the build-to requirement. So I'm showing right now a site plan for the property. You'll notice that the existing building is cross-hatched here. Proposed buildings are in this darkened gray. This is Wanda that runs north-south along here, and the main entrance to the site is here. It can be a little tricky to tell. There's existing parking that goes along the front of the building along Wanda. So all of these conditions were compliant when the building was constructed many decades ago. As we know it, there's a setback. You can't be in the setback, and that's how it went for a long time. In 2019, the City Council reviewed several of our dimensional requirements. One of these was to change the setback to more of a form-based code requirement. So instead of being, for example, 20 foot back, and your building has to be that far back, instead they changed it to a build-to requirement where 80% of your building width has to be within 0 to 15 feet. So the intention was to bring these buildings up to the lot line with parking behind them. So this is a compliant site. It's legal non-conforming because that was adopted in 2019, and now they're seeking a large expansion. It's been determined that this large expansion would be subject to that 0 to 15 foot lot line. So by the ordinance, they would be asked to build this building all the way up to Wanda here. So they are now seeking a 246-foot variance to effectively shift the build-to line from Wanda to this line here, which is the eastern front of the proposed building. So that's kind of the primary purpose. There's a few other variances. One is that surface parking is not permitted between the building and the frontage, so they are requesting that this body permit that. There is a 15-foot parking setback. They're requesting a variance of 4 feet from that, so the parking setback would only be 11 feet. The schedule of regulations also details that there has to be one pedestrian entrance for every 75 feet of frontage, which means that this site would have to have 10 pedestrian entrances. They're seeking a variance of 9 pedestrian entrances so that there would only be one access point, as there is right now.
If I may, through the chair, is there a pointer to kind of show me some, I'd like to just see, just kind of,
Yeah, absolutely.
because I was looking here and I realized excuse me.
That's not being pointed at this.
Right.
Yeah.
You all see that?
Yes.
So this is the eastern frontage. That's Wanda. This is the existing building. So notice the building is about 135 feet setback, which when it was constructed, I'm sure was well above what was required. If that building were to be constructed today, 80% of the frontage would have to be within 15 feet of this line here. So it's been determined that this expansion would be subject to that. So rather than building this building up here in front of the existing parking, they are proposing to set it back here where it's more or less in line with the existing building. But as the code is written, they have to be within that 15 feet. So that's why they are here tonight seeking that variance for that 246 feet.
All right, thank you, Kyle. Before we get too far into questions to staff, I think there are probably no members of the public here, but just in case there are, let's open the public hearing at 7:12 p.m. Seeing no members of the public come forward, we'll also close the public hearing at 7:12 p.m. And before we get into further questions to staff, Dustin, as liaison to Planning Commission, this proposal has been to Planning Commission as a discussion item on March 16th. Could you fill us in on the discussion that took place at the Planning Commission level about this proposal and the fact that it's so far out of compliance with the recently adopted form-based code?
Yeah, we did have a large discussion about the parking in front of, and I know the applicant will probably discuss why the parking remains in the front due to the use of the building as well as they're proposing for the building. So we were having questions about that. There is a discussion item also about the additional building that they're putting along the train tracks that are actually intending to use for the city of Ferndale as kind of a DPW building. So again, why that additional building is separated and kind of just pushed back there as opposed to being connected to the existing structure. And then one of the things that we did have a lot of concerns about is the amount of impermeable pavement now, especially there was a large amount of trees on the property currently. And obviously this is just a site plan, but I'm pretty sure they would have quite a bit of trees that would have to be either put on the site or paid in lieu of. So there was a concern about possible runoff on adjoining properties perhaps. So those were kind of things that we still had kind of filled in that we needed to get answered. Do you have anything else, Kyle?
Yeah, if I could, I just wanted to add that these two buildings in the rear, they do not require any variances. They are, they're complying with the setbacks that are existing for the rear portion of the site. And of course, any kind of drainage or tree removal issues does get handled by the Planning Commission. And these either get relocated on site or paid into the city's tree fund.
Thank you, Kyle. Dustin, I'm really more concerned about and interested in what the discussion was about the application of the form-based code to these parcels.
I can't remember the details exactly about that particular item.
Okay, and I asked because this is something that Planning Commission just drafted and the city just adopted like 3 years ago. And what we're being asked for today is obviously an extreme deviation from a recently passed city ordinance. There was no discussion at the Planning Commission level about the intent of the form-based code or whether it should or was intended to apply to parcels of this nature.
Yeah, I can't go into too many details off the top of my head that I can remember, so I don't want to speculate what I may have recalled.
If I may, through the chair,
Sure.
Do you know, ultimately, what was the planning commission's decision regarding this, other than to forward it to the BZA?
I mean,
If
it
you
wasn't,
recall,
yeah, I mean, from what I can recall, it was not a, I guess if you will, slam dunk of a project that we said everything is perfect the way it is. Again, we did have concerns about, you know, the parking in front of and, you know, is there an opportunity to place the parking in the correct area and build the building to the front? We had some concerns still with the project, but.
Was it a complete vote as far as a,
We actually did not.
you didn't vote on it at all?
No,
You
we
didn't
did
vote
not
on it
vote
at all? Okay.
No,
Only discussion.
Only
Yeah,
just a
discussion.
discussion.
Got it, okay.
We haven't been for site plan review yet at this point.
Through the chair, Justin, was there any discussion of the building being a non-compliant building right now with the zoning requirements and the ordinance going further out of non-compliance? Was there any discussion?
Not that I can recall. I know we understand the existing building is still being very much used the way it is. So to push them into needing to make that compliant as well, we didn't really have that discussion. But again, really the parking, the discussion that we just had about was, you know, we weren't fond of it being in the front because again, it doesn't really follow what the code requires. But there is some explanation as to why they are setting it up, the property, the way they are.
Kyle, digging into the actual variance request for a moment, I see one of the variance requests is for a variance to allow surface parking between the building and the frontage if the building were built as proposed. There's already an existing parking lot that covers that whole frontage, right? Why would there be a need for a variance to allow continued use of an existing parking lot?
When I was going through this with the city attorney, I mean, we were just looking at all the issues that could arise potentially. I believe that the parking is not completely utilized, or at least it's not striped. You can see here on the plan that this faded parking area is existing. I believe that's striped. And as far as I know, this is the limit of that existing parking. So in the eyes of the city attorney, this parking up here is really the parking that would be part of that variance request. This would be new parking, essentially.
Currently an existing asphalt lot?
I believe so, yes, it is. But is it striped? The whole thing is striped? Right there? Yes. Okay. So it is asphalt, but this area is not striped.
Okay, so that's the only issue though, is it's not striped, but it's currently asphalt and it's currently parkable right now?
Yes.
Okay. I don't know if I agree that there's a need for a variance for an existing asphalt lot, but I'm not going to argue with Dan on this. So, let me see.
Through the chair, are we able to have the applicant make his presentation?
Let me check first and make sure that no board members have questions for you specifically as staff.
Okay.
And then we'll have the applicant come up and make their presentation and answer questions as well.
Okay.
Thanks, Kyle. Other board members, does anyone else have questions for staff at this time before we hear from the applicant?
Through the chair, I'd like to ask staff about with the parking area and striping those spaces. Are they going to be required to update the entire area to meet like tree and landscape ordinances for that new parking?
Yes, they would. That would be covered under site plan review, and it would be covered as part of engineering review if they have to, I think, restore more than 20% of the lot. They have to re-review their stormwater detention standards.
And so what we're being shown, it shows the parking lot, but we're not seeing, you know, those parts of it that would be required to be a part of the site plan.
So the darker spaces here would be striped, so those would become, you know, more visible parking. So the whole area is asphalt, but it's blank asphalt, but these areas would be fully striped.
All right, let's have the applicant come up. Why don't you come and tell us about your project and tell us about your request?
Or do you want?
Pictures would be great.
Sure.
Thank you all for being here today. I apologize for our tardiness. We actually had no power at 965 Wanda. It was an issue with DTE, a bad line, and just as we're leaving to come to the meeting, the power just went back on at 965 Wanda. So we appreciate your patience. We appreciate all of you taking the time for this special session. Had we known the ordinance was changed back in 2019, we would have contributed with some input to demonstrate that the ordinance change would have the unintended consequence to negatively impact existing operations such as our project. I would like to take a few minutes to tell you a little bit about who we are as a company. We started brass aluminum forging in 1998 at 1351 Jarvis, Ferndale, with 11 employees. BAFE is an aluminum metal forming company, also known as forging. Picture a blacksmith pounding hot metal, and that is what forging is. We took over a company that was in bankruptcy, that was started by another family in 1934. We took a major risk, but we felt that the potential was there to grow BAFE back to the company it once was. We struggled off and on for about 5 years. After 5 years, things started to blossom. Our efforts started to bear fruit. We expanded Jarvis and raised the roof to add a new press to the operation. We, again, expanded at Jarvis to add another press. It got to the point where we needed a new building. The city of Ferndale was extremely helpful, to say the least, in securing this expansion. With all the right people at the table, we were able to purchase 965 Wanda and bring the building back into service. 965 Wanda was vacant for about 8 years before our family purchased it. The project was a major undertaking, but again, with the right people at the table and a great team, we knew that we could be successful. It was a true public-private partnership, which is why Ferndale is so dear to us. Had it not been for guidance of the city's administration, we would not be where we are today. Here are some photos of what the building looked like. As you can see, when we took over the building, the facade, we put a brand new facade on the building, and there's that lighting is obviously brand new. I'm sorry, Kyle, if you could help me just so they could see some of the. That's just what it looked like when we took it over, obviously, and all new electrical, all new utilities, water, gas, electrical, transformers, and you name it. Everything was brought up to code. Thank you, Kyle. The expansion that we embarked on back in 2013 was great for everyone. We were able to turn an eyesore into a lively campus. We were instrumental in helping 3 other Ferndale companies, Allied Printing, Valentine's Distillery, and Custom Hollow Doors, amongst ourselves, to expand and stay in the city. And the tenants, they were able to create high-level employment opportunities as we created high-level opportunities ourselves. The taxes paid to the city of Ferndale are helping the community, and it also made us a part of the vibrant Ferndale community by being a part of the Mayor's Business Council. We have spent over $12 million between the real estate of 965 Wanda and for the operations of BAFE. Here we are again, ready to expand. We are very fortunate and humbled that we have the opportunity to expand and the right to expand the building on our property. The main reason for the expansion is very interesting. As the electric vehicle market is emerging, we are in a great position to supply components to the electric vehicle market. Aluminum has become a high demand commodity. To say it simply, aluminum has the strength and it's lightweight, which is what electric vehicles need to obtain more battery life. We are working with the likes of GM, Ford, Stellantis, formerly Chrysler, the Japanese companies and the German companies. We are also working with Rivian and Plymouth. There is a big push from the current administration to have electric vehicle components made in America. We are proud to say we are the only American company producing these aluminum forgings in the United States. We feel very fortunate that we have these opportunities, and we appreciate you listening to our story. As I said in the beginning, the amended ordinance, which was not in place when we purchased the property in 2013, has created a hardship. We purchased this property with the intent that this would be our home for the years to come. The hardship created by strictly adhering to the ordinance is preventing us from expanding our operation as its originally intended purpose. We invite you for a visit at any time to see what we are doing and give you a tour of the campus. At this point, I would like to turn it over to Eric Williams, our engineer, who can better explain the specifics of the site plan which you are reviewing. Thank you again for your time.
Thank you.
Kyle, did you have that laser pointer? Possibly use that as well. This button here? Okay, awesome. All right, good evening, everyone. Appreciate you having us here this evening. My name is Eric Williams with Stonefield Engineering and Design. Our address is 607 Shelby Street, Suite 200, Detroit, Michigan. Obviously, as Kyle kind of already elaborated on, we are seeking 4-dimensional variances tonight. Just to point to a few items as it relates to the existing conditions. Like Kyle said, this building is right around 211,000 square feet. There are 4 tenants operating within the building today. BAFE takes generally the northern third of the building with their loading operations on the northeast side. And let me just point it out here just so we can all see. So today they do have loading operations in this area. Their office space is generally in this portion of the building. Allied Printing, which is in the southeast corner, generally this little corner, has loading operations down here. We have Valentine's Vodka in the southwest corner with loading operations, and Custom Hollow Doors, which take up this area of the building. I think it's important to point that out because obviously each of these tenants needs separate loading facilities, they need separate parking facilities. So as you can see today, and I apologize, the survey's got a little more information maybe than what we'd want to show you at this point. But like Kyle mentioned, this is a striped parking lot in this area. We have additional parking down here. There is a gated entrance, and I would note the whole site is fenced today. Obviously, security and safety is extremely important for industrial facilities. As the site sits today, there is a gravel access road. I'm not sure if any of you were able to make it out there, but there is an access road that circulates the site back here, and that provides access to Valentine's and the door company, with additional parking, I believe, installed in this corner. Yeah, go ahead. Thank you, Kyle. So again, I think, trying to paint the picture of how the site operates today, where these entry points to the current tenant spaces are, I think is important to keep in mind as we talk about the site plan going forward. Back over to the proposed site plan. Okay, just to elaborate on the proposed site plan a little bit more, as Kyle mentioned, we are looking to maintain access from Wanda. It'll continue to be gated. But I think the one major improvement we are looking to make as far as access goes is Wordsworth runs east-west on the south boundary here. We are seeking access to Wordsworth through the southwest corner of the property. And I think, as far as on-site traffic goes, this is critical. It allows, full circulation of the site. Vehicles don't have to turn around and go back down through Wanda. But I think the other piece to keep in mind is this provides a second means of access to the site. And I think when we talk about fire safety, emergency vehicle access, this is going to be a significant improvement to the property and allow for a second point of access should, let's say a large vehicle is blocking the Wanda access. This will provide a second point of access should emergency vehicles need to navigate the site. I know there was a question regarding the need for a variance for the front parking. So I know Kyle touched on the fact that there is parking out there today. I would like to just add that the requested parking setback variance as well, that is an existing condition. We're not looking to encroach any closer to Wanda than what we are today. But we're obviously looking to make substantial improvements in the parking area via striping. I think we would fully intend to meet the landscaping code when we get to that point. So along with that, when we're looking at this site plan, we obviously have the 143,000 square foot addition on the north side. And the critical component here is connection to the existing building. For BAFE, they absolutely needed this addition to be attached to the building. And so I think that's important to keep in mind when you look at, could we push this building to the front? I think, there's some substantial negative impacts that would cause. And so let's say we did push it all the way up to the front. What you would see is that access to the rear of the site would be severely limited, and we'd most likely need to seek a second point of access in the northeast corner of the site along Wanda. Along with the imperviousness, and I apologize, I'm going to call you Dustin, I can't read your last name from here, had mentioned we would intend to provide on-site stormwater detention, would fully adhere to the code, and we'll obviously work through that with the city engineers. So to touch on the criteria for the variances, I should say, obviously maintaining public safety and welfare. So as you can see, we are looking to maintain the existing setback from Wanda. And I think what's really important to keep in mind is that across Wanda, and specifically in the northeast corner of the property, there are single-family homes located across the street. So based on existing condition and, the future plans, this, to us was the least impactful to the neighborhood. We're obviously keeping that building and the operations, I think it's 250, 260 feet from the right-of-way and trying to sink it into the site as opposed to bringing those operations to the front of the site and having an industrial building at their back doorstep. Compatibility with the neighborhood. So again, this is a permitted use within the industrial district. As Mr. Denha had alluded to, they purchased the building in 2013 when this particular ordinance wasn't in place. That ordinance came around, but they are looking to expand a permitted use within the district. We're meeting all of their setback requirements other than the 4 that we're in front of you for today. Traffic impacts. So again, we're looking to maintain the existing Wanda access, but we are making substantial improvements by providing a second point of access to the site. And again, I think that's going to, God forbid there is ever an emergency, it provides us, an additional level of safety. Nuisance. So again, being cognizant of the neighborhood to the east, I think this kind of goes back to maintaining the existing setback of the property, or of the building, I should say. So again, we're not looking to encroach into those, those folks' backyards any more than what may already be out there today. Unique circumstances. So again, I think it kind of comes back to the purchase of this property and expanding it for permitted use within the district. When Mr. Denha purchased the property, we didn't know that, the city intended to amend the zoning code. And I think if this was new construction, we could find a way to accommodate, the city's requirements. But I think, what we're seeking here today is the ideal site plan for BAFE's operations, and it's a reasonable expansion of the permitted use. Practical difficulty, I think, is an important one. Should we have to adhere to the proposed build-to line, which I think is kind of the main focus, obviously the parking is tied into that. But what I think would be important to note is we obviously have the 4 tenants at each kind of corner of the building. And again, if we had to slide the building all the way to the front, we would take an existing non-conforming parking lot and be forced to move it to the rear of the site, and then that would alter on-site circulation, on-site operations of tenants that have been here for a number of years and want to continue to operate in the same place. Intent of the ordinance, so I'm not familiar with what occurred in 2019, but I think probably the intent is, again, to bring the buildings to the front and sink the parking into the rear of the site and maybe have those industrial activities, focus at the rear of the site. A lot of the industrial properties along Wanda, along Wordsworth, Jarvis, etc., they're much smaller properties than what we're looking at today. So it may make sense in that instance. But because we are able to set the building back and the operations back so deep into the site, we believe that we are still upholding the intent of the code. A lesser variance. So I think any expansion of this particular building would obviously require a variance. And should we be requesting a lesser variance than what we are in front of you for today, we would still see a similar negative impact to existing site circulation, the removal of existing parking, and ultimately an inadequate plan or expansion for BAFE. With that, we appreciate your time this evening and would be happy to answer any other questions.
Great, thank you. I want to start by asking you about the parking setback variance that you've requested. I think you made a good point that that one of the reasons that you want to keep the building further back on the site is because there are homes and families that are up to the northeast here. By that same logic, wouldn't it make sense to push your parking lot a little bit further back and actually abide by the required 15-foot setback?
I think the point I would make is it's an existing setback. I think we would fully intend to landscape the frontage there. But again, it's a setback that was constructed when the building was originally put into place. We didn't really intend to alter it.
Is it something that could be done?
I'm sorry, what's that?
Is it something that could be done? What's the difficulty with complying with the 15-foot setback?
Good evening, I'm Richie Atto, and I actually worked on the building when the dentist first acquired it. I've known the family. Jeff was much younger. Are you referring to the 15-foot setback for the parking when you asked the question? I think we can meet the 15-foot setback. It's because we're only encroaching in it by a small amount, and since we have to reconfigure anyway to accommodate landscaping, because we're planning, if we're able to obtain the variance from this board, then our next stop is the Planning Commission. I'm sure the Planning Commission is going to ask for certain landscaping and things. So the short answer is yes, we could meet the 15-foot setback for the parking to have more room for landscaping.
Thank you. Yeah, and I'm sure that the Planning Commission is going to expect that there will be some improvements and some landscaping up at the front of the parcel, assuming you're able to get variances to move the project forward.
And just a couple of more points that I'd like to make at the risk of repeating what was already said. When the building was purchased, I was actually involved with the family in making the decision to purchase it, and the question was, what can we do with this building? It was in very bad shape. It had environmental issues. And I knew that their business was expanding. Jeff's being a little bit modest when he talks about the beginnings, because the business was so bad that his father, Mike Denha, called him one day and said, "That's it, shut it down. We just can't keep, borrowing money and going into debt to keep the business open." Jeff wanted to keep it running. He's worried about the dozen or less employees that he had, and he thought he could, and he just said, "Dad, give me 90 days. I'm going to turn this thing around." And he also told you that he had about 10 or 11 employees, but he didn't tell you that, you know, that went to 70, then it went to 80, then it went to 100, and I think they're at about 145 employees today. And all those jobs in the city, and what the suffering that they had to go through to get it there, and to run out of space on Jarvis. I actually tore the ceiling off the roof to make it 8 feet higher just to accommodate some of the new presses. So I've been with them from the beginning. But when we analyzed the building, I mean, the thought was to grow, and, you know, we didn't just make the decision lightly. We studied the property and the setbacks and the uses, because we didn't want to come in and ask for a setback and use and all kinds of other variances. So the building was purchased for the intended purpose of operating and expanding as necessary. He's actually already expanded twice since he took over, but he was able to do it within the footprint of the building. Now it comes to the point where it can't be expanded within the footprint anymore because the space is all consumed, and the tenants that came along, a couple of them, two for sure, were looking outside of Ferndale because they just didn't think they could be accommodated, and we were able to accommodate Allied Printing and also the custom hollow metal. As a matter of fact, I buy doors from them, and they called me to evaluate a building that they were buying in another city, and I said, why do you want to leave Ferndale? We don't have anywhere to go. So I introduced them to Jeff, and one thing led to another, and then they were able to sign the lease there. So we can't expand within the footprint of the building anymore. And the operation is such that there's these multi-ton presses within the building. Again, he started with 2 or 3, now they have 14 or 15. Each press is very large, very heavy, and they're in a concrete pit that is anywhere from 10 to 12 feet deep. And the pits themselves are expensive, and it's not as if you could just take machines and move them around to accommodate traffic or changing a pattern. So they're kind of set, not so much set in stone, but set in concrete. So the material has to come in, and as you grow, you need to accommodate more material. And then in order to keep up with the demand, they need more presses. So to set up the new operation, you know, the presses have to be such that the material can come into one location. And by the way, Adam Bruckner, who's the production manager, is here. He can speak to the production way better than I can. But I just know that the material has to come in and then be distributed to the presses, which are going to be in the existing building and also in the proposed future building. So the impact of moving the building closer to meet the strict adherence of the ordinance, which, you know, we believe, we think it's a very good ordinance, but the unintended consequences of not considering how this ordinance impacts existing buildings, I'm sure there's other people that might feel it, but we're here to talk about our hardship. The hardship is too numerous to mention because it affects the truck traffic. I mean, large trucks that have 53-foot trailers have to come in and circulate, and it's not, oh, there's going to be 1 or 2 a week. No, sometimes there's 2 or 3 each day. And to pull the building forward and eliminate all that circulation space would cripple the business. I mean, it's hard enough operating now in the limited space, but having more space, but the incorrect layout to literally meet the letter of the ordinance the negative impact is, you couldn't even measure it. I mean, I don't see how the project can move forward because we didn't just lightly take it. We actually tried different scenarios, and the main thing is getting the material in and out of the building and having the accommodation for more presses. And the biggest thing is the safety of our residents, but also the employees and the vendors that have to come and go, because there's a lot of material comes in and out. Unfortunately, if you drive by right now, there's inventory outside because there's just nowhere to put it. And there's a security guard because aluminum is very expensive right now. You know, maybe there shouldn't be inventory outside, but they're at a point now where they just can't work within the space, and that's why we need to expand. And we don't dislike the ordinance, and we don't want to ignore the ordinance, but it just doesn't work for this existing condition. And not only does it create a hardship for the owners who had an intended purpose when they bought the building, but the literal interpretation of the ordinance would actually cause a greater hardship, we believe, it's our opinion, for the residents, because bringing everything closer to the street brings that operation closer to the residential homes. But worse than that is the traffic of getting all these trucks in and out of the building, because by having one building where it is existing and another building in a different position would destroy the circulation and cause unsafe conditions.
I appreciate that. You've raised a lot of points, and I want to get back to you on a couple of these.
Okay.
First, clearly the work that's been done on the existing building is significant. I appreciate you showing the pictures. I am familiar with the site. It's a huge improvement, clearly, with the existing work that's been done. You were just talking about truck traffic, and I want to talk about this for a moment. If the building were pulled forward, the center portion of the building were pulled forward, you had mentioned that there would need to be a new curb cut and access drive up at the northeast corner of the parcel. Would that mean that trucks would have to go north and south, up and down Wanda, and then turn into that drive to go along the side of the building there?
Actually, we had this discussion today, assuming that, somebody on the board would want to know. And I don't know how we get trucks in to the existing loading docks and areas if the new building comes out to the frontage line or within 0 to 15 feet. Because the last thing that anybody would want is to have a 53-foot rig, try to back in. And then if there was another access point. Okay, Adam wants to comment on the truck traffic. This is Adam Bruckner, he's the production manager, but I'll be available for any other questions.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Good evening.
Is this the pointer here, laser pointer? The Google Maps would actually be better for us. Can we just all tab this over?
Yeah, so currently today, what you guys see in the north-south direction of Wanda here, the truck traffic flows in through here. Where you can see this frontage here, facing the east side of the building, is where the traffic flows today throughout the building. Majority of the material coming in, they come in 12-foot boom links of aluminum. So it's a very large material. They come in bulk. So right now, all that truck traffic happens in this area. Our concern is if we did go into this area and up into here, you guys can see in this general area, it's all residential. It's part of the community. To pull it up in here, that would also impede on our existing employee parking. That would create a significant safety concern for us, because now we're interacting our truck traffic and with our employee pedestrian traffic. Which we can reduce that today. With that, going off over here, there would have to be an additional entrance, somewhere along the backside or something that we'd have to do if we actually close that section off for that easement that you see existing today.
So would you need basically like another one of those giant curb cuts, literally right across from University Street there, in order to get your traffic in?
Correct. It would actually have to, if we were to set that up and have another truck traffic flow back in, to add to that, the thought of this here, my background is very much automotive, and the reason why Jeff had brought me on board is because of us expanding into this electrification of vehicles. So a lot of thought went into the operations of the expansion going out into this area here. And it's all about material and process flow. We have standards in the automotive industry that is that IATF 16949 standard. So this whole site was developed to adhere to that standard for the automotive industry to develop our operations in this frontage here. Bringing it up, what it would do would dissect that operations. When material comes into this section, we're not able to do the process flow through the building. We would actually be splitting that process. So the actual process of operations would significantly be impacted if we had to move our operations up into this area here.
And would you end up having trucks coming in and out daily out of a narrow corridor between two buildings and popping out with only about 10 or 15?
And keep in mind with the other tenants
Sidewalk.
on site as well, so it's not just our truck traffic that we are trying to manage, it's the other tenants as well, who also have numerous trucks come in throughout the day.
Let's talk for a minute about the other fourth variance request here. One of you had mentioned earlier that there's been a substantial growth of employees in the building, that it's gone from 12 to 40 to 50 to 80 to over 100 employees. So you got a lot of people in the building now, and I'm assuming there will be a lot of people in the addition as well if the addition is constructed. I'm curious as to why you only have one entrance on the entire eastern frontage of the building when you've got so much width of that frontage, and you are asking for a variance that would give you 9 fewer entrances than is required under the ordinance. Isn't that a safety concern if you've only got one entrance on that entire?
Yeah, there is
huge expanse?
actually, multiple, exits that we have front, back, and even on the side today for fire exits. It is important for us as far as our safety of the employees when they enter the building. Like we stated before, it is a hot forging operation. Controlling that traffic through the operations instead of having them enter in multiple locations, because there is certain PPE for the safety that the employees are directed into their own personal lockers so they can change into a PPE required dress code that we have, opposed to being able to enter into other sections of the building where they may not have that PPE on. So they're directed into the locker room as it is today so they can change into that safety required clothing to enter into those parts of the facility.
So the suggestion isn't then that there be next to no doors on that frontage, it's that most of those doors will be exit doors as opposed to entrance doors. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, on the exterior they would all be exit, correct. For fire emergencies, correct.
For the purposes of the city and the ordinance, I just wanted to clarify that pedestrian access, it's supposed to be specifically from the right-of-way to the building. It's designed for easy access for pedestrians walking in. So, any of the building doors and exits on the interior of the site, that goes through building review. That's part of health and safety, and it goes through our site, or our full building review with the building official. So I just want to clarify, I think for pedestrian access, as it's defined in the zoning ordinance, we are talking about the entrance off of Wanda. So I don't know if your team wants to speak to security issues or other concerns of why you want just one entrance as opposed to several.
Well, the only comment is there can't be multiple entrances for security and safety reasons. However, if it was like a look that the desire was, if this was a retail center, obviously you'd want more entrances and open the storefront to the pedestrians. But in this case, if we did it, they'd not be usable because first of all, the general public is not even allowed in the building. People have to come in and be let in. They can't just walk into the building, or if they do, they walk into a small area. All visitors are by appointment, with the exception, like I said, if they get into the building, they can't go past the vestibule. So if we wanted to do that as an architectural feature to make it look like it was more pedestrian friendly, that's an issue, but that we could consider, obviously, if it made sense. But it would never be used because it's a safety issue, and also the building itself is not at grade. So the entire building is up roughly, 42 to 48 inches. So if we had multiple pedestrian doors, whether we wanted to use them or not, there'd be a raised landing and a stairway at every one of them. And I'm not sure how that would look or work, but the few that we have, you have to approach them through a stairway or a ramp because the building itself is actually above grade to accommodate the operation.
I appreciate the detail. I was really more concerned that there be sufficient exits proposed on the building. Having sat as a planning commissioner at the time this form-based code was adopted, I am comfortable and confident to say that this requirement of the entrances was a discussion that was based on commercial districts. It was not based on industrial buildings in any way, nor did they come up at all during the discussion.
And again,
We'd have been there at the time we did this as well.
we've reviewed the ordinance and we support the ordinance and we know what we believe we understand the intent, but when drafting an ordinance, I myself, I am a planning commissioner of another neighboring community, and we just cannot think of every single thing when the ordinance is drafted, so sometimes there's unintended results of what was codified in the ordinance. I'm sure nobody wanted, multiple entrances to an industrial building, but at the time that it was drafted, you just can't think of everything. I mean, some things come before our planning commission and their businesses that didn't even exist 10 years ago. And nobody considered that, and it's like, how do you classify it and where should it, which bucket should it be put in? So it's a great ordinance, but it doesn't work when you have a large existing developed site, and that's the problem, that's the hardship that's created for us because it happened after the fact, and complying with it is a severe hardship because then it not only does it not allow the new addition to be used properly, but it has a negative impact on something that you're already doing and you have been doing for several years. So it's like a double hardship because it doesn't just take away the hardship of what you want to build, but it creates a hardship of something that's already existing that doesn't exist today. So that's our point.
With your experience as a planning commissioner working in municipal governance yourself, you are probably aware that as a zoning board, we're a quasi-judicial body and our decisions are precedential, which means that whatever we decide today is going to impact not just your parcel, but is going to impact any similarly situated parcel that's in the city. This means that no matter how sympathetic we may be to your specific project, we have to think larger scale across the entire city. Because with the scope of the variances that you're requesting, it's difficult to interpret this as anything short of a request that we essentially write the form-based code out of the entire zoning ordinance when it comes to industrial parcels. So in order to try to avoid doing that, I'd like to ask Kyle whether you can tell us whether there are other parcels that are at this scale within the city that would potentially be impacted by the decision, and if there are, how many? How many are we talking about here?
And not to interrupt, but since you mentioned that, the way we look at things is we have to consider the individual case. So just because this discussion is applicable to this particular business, and there's presses that cannot be moved, and a lot of other things that we can get into, a similar size operation wouldn't necessarily have the same issues that we're bringing up. So I do understand not wanting to have a negative precedent, but we do look at things individually, and if somebody says, well, you did it, or it doesn't matter.
I think
Tell
you're
us
going
your
to have more questions
circumstances.
from the board about your specific instances and your practical difficulties. I think there are going to be a number of other questions about that, but I want to get this data point from Kyle for right now. Thank you.
To my knowledge, I mean, you spoke just for industrial districts, right? That was
Right.
So for industrial districts, I don't know if there's a single property that has more of a concern related to the form-based code. I don't know if there's any industrial zone properties that have this far of a reach, this far of a setback. Frankly, I mean, if you look at a map of the city, this much open space, it's hard to find in the city at all. So the notion that you would have an industrial site this large with the building set this far back, and they're seeking an expansion into such a large open area, I don't think there's another site, frankly. A lot of the industrial buildings do comply with the requirement. If you look north of this site into the the light industrial district that we have on the other side of 9, that's a little more built out and compact. But I mean, this site is truly fairly unique in its how it's situated.
Thank you, Kyle. At this point, I want to open this up to questions from other commissioners. If you have questions for either the applicant or for staff.
Okay, through the chair, a couple of things. The other tenants are now currently parking where your office people park. Is that what's going on there? I'm just trying to visualize the parking spaces.
So currently, 2 of the tenants, their actual entrance to their facility is west. So there's a parking lot on the west side that's specific, and that would be the Valentine Distillery as well as the custom hollow metal door. And then the Allied Printing tenant, which is at the southeast corner, they have a parking lot that's pretty much at the southeast portion of the site. Well, and obviously the brass aluminum forging site.
So as an example, the Valentine Distillery, do they, and the door place being on the west side, where do they park?
So the parking for the building faces east, so the east parking lot is for brass aluminum, and then the southeast portion is for Allied, but the Valentine and custom hollow metal is actually on the opposite side facing the railroad track, so they're all the way to the west.
Closer to their doors.
Closer to their
Gotcha.
doors.
I just want to make sure.
So they have parking there, and they also have barrier-free parking for their visitors and vendors.
How do their trucks get there?
Pardon me?
How do their trucks get there?
So all the trucks come in the one entrance, and
And
they
go all the way around the
proceed
back, I see.
west along the side,
Okay,
and then they back into the loading docks.
so that road that they currently take is where the new building's proposed?
Right.
Okay, just trying to get a visual.
So the other visual that I wanted to, right now, if a truck is on the site, whether it's at Brass Forging or Allied, if it has to cross over and go to the west, it can do it within the site. But if the building was fully forward, any truck that's on the site that needs to get to the other side would have to back on Wanda, back in, back on Wanda again. So I'm not going to say you're doubling it, because that's not the case, but you're greatly increasing the amount of traffic that comes in and out to traverse on Wanda that could normally be traveling on the site within the site. That won't be the case if the building was, blocking that access.
So the northern driveway that we have discussed, that's not there, would be similar to what they're currently using to get around to the back?
It'll
of the
just be
building?
shifted to the north, correct?
That is correct.
And it'll be paved, and it'll be wider than normal so that it accommodate fire truck access as well as truck access. Obviously,
It's still the one entry, the gated entry, where they all come in?
correct.
Okay. So losing the parking, if you were to shift the building to the east towards Wanda, as our ordinance would like, losing that parking would also impact a drive, or so the access to Valentine and the floor place couldn't be off of, what's that side street there? Is that Wordsworth? So it couldn't be there, and then your facility as well as Allied be at the front, and then the northern.
So the three,
I don't think the same truck is going to the same place, is my point.
but sometimes they need to go back and forth because Brass Forging has a loading door on the west side and on the east side. So every time the truck goes from one to the other, it's on the site versus going off the site onto Wanda, back on, and then back, so that we're increasing that traffic.
But with the new building, it should be less cumbersome for, I think it would be, not necessarily now that you're gonna have 3 places to drop off things.
Well, it would be much less cumbersome in the scenario that we proposed, but if we had, if it was strict adherence to the ordinance, I don't see how it could be done, because the 3 negatives are there's nowhere to park for the tenants that park on the east side, and they're far, far away from the entrance. The entrance is difficult to
There
move.
will be no entrance at the rear where there could be parking if the building was shifted forward.
It's difficult because there's no place to receive and have the security. It's more of, there's plenty of openings there, but there are more emergency exits. And then the second,
Allied has its own space that's not connected to the back.
yeah, so Allied, if Allied had to park in the back, there's no access for them at all.
No, I think that Allied and the Forge company can still enter at the same place that they come in, because that building's not gonna be impacted at all at the Wanda side. However, when you build
if
it
it's-
next to the building is
Yeah,
what
if
I'm
it's
saying.
proposed, but if it's forward, it impacts the truck traffic, the parking, but more importantly, the operation, because having more space, but you can't operate properly with, with the material receiving, and it goes through a process. I mean, I'm not the expert on the process, but the material comes in, one part of the process, then it goes to the press, from the press it goes to the heat treat, from the heat treat it goes to a finishing, from the finishing, so it's a whole process that you would upset to the point where it just wouldn't work. It's not that.
Whatever is
it's-
going into the building has to be set up the way you have it proposed. It can't be all shifted north, or not north, east.
That is correct,
That-
yeah.
that's the whole-
Operations is laid out as we proposed. Yeah, for process and material flow, that's the only way.
Gotcha,
that
okay.
We'd be able to do it.
Can
I
you
mean,
actually,
there's cases where people come before you or come before our board and they just don't want to do things, but our cases, we don't have a choice because the operation is existing and we can't change what's existing. So if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. You just can't
Board
do
Member
it.
Stedman, did you have a question?
I have 2 quick questions. So let's tackle this one first. Can you pull up the one that actually shows the 3 buildings, actually 4B1, B2, C, and D? Okay, can you toggle back really quick? Okay, can you show me you said all the trucking happens internal now as opposed to going back out onto Wanda. Can you just show me with the laser pointer your truck flow?
And make it go slowly so we can kind of see.
Just,
That's what I was trying to
Sure.
Make it
understand,
slow.
too, yeah.
So with Wanda Street here, you can kind of see this funnel here,
Yep.
right? All traffic, truck traffic, employee traffic, this is fenced off all the way around the property. Traffic is funneled right through here.
yep,
Currently today for Allied Printing, their truck traffic happens right here.
okay,
That's where their loading docks are. Today for brass aluminum forging, it happens right here.
okay,
For the custom hollow doors, it happens right
yeah,
here.
but how did you get there? You
Oh,
skipped a
right
step.
here, sorry, I apologize.
That's what I
Okay,
thought.
so you take
Okay,
the road,
gotcha.
okay,
Then custom hollow doors, and then Valentine
Valentine.
happens right here.
okay, can you
As
toggle
well
back
as
to
the
other map,
brass,
please?
as well as the brass trucking that has to
Yeah.
go to the back.
So we also have a back entrance here for equipment as well.
Can you toggle to the other map, please? Now, can you show me the new flow? How do you get to Valentine's Vodka on the new map?
So basically, that road that runs from east to west is going to be continued, but that road will, pick it up and move it north. So it would be more northerly than it is today,
It'll
Okay,
be
so it'll
at
be
the
all
lot
the way at the
line.
top.
Yeah,
right? And
Okay.
I think the minimum is 24 feet, and we might have proposed
Yes.
26 feet. We wanted it to be a little bit more generous than normal.
And remind me, were there any problems with getting the second cut to have that entrance at the north side? Was there any problem to get that?
I think it would be allowed under the ordinance. I think the engineering department would allow that.
Okay, so my second question then is, as I'm understanding it, you're saying the flow goes from building B1 to building B2 to building C to building D. Am I interpreting that correctly? It has to go in that order?
Are you talking about as far as our process and material
Yes,
flow?
yeah, you said it had to go in a
Yes.
certain order.
Yes,
So it has to start at B1, that's where the presses are.
correct, yeah. The bulk
Well,
of
that's
the,
where the material comes in.
right here is where our majority of our 12-foot boom length material comes in. At this point, it would have a choice to go into this location or this location, in which, this is an existing forging operation that is today. So at that point of material receiving, it would have a choice to go to the existing forging operations or our expanded new forging operations. Through that process, the long boom links get cut to length and they travel down through, they get heated up, they go into a forging process, they get cooled, they go into a heat treat process, they go into a trim process, and then to a polish. So you need that flow. If material was to come in here, and like say, if this section was shifted up here, I would be entering that material into a heat treat place to where
Okay.
you wouldn't be able.
I think I understand. Is there any requirement for this to be next to E? Is that E?
This here?
Yeah.
Or- No, that's completely separate.
Okay,
For
so
these
theoretically,
operations.
this can't change, this is in place, right?
This.
So it has to go to here, has to go to B2, has to go to C, but what if C was here? And from C it has to go to D, and what if D was here? Still have the same flow, but in a different layout.
But that would completely eliminate the parking there. So you're saying, I don't understand with the flow of the truck traffic. I think what you're proposing that is I stick this here, which would then force my raw material to come in directly into this operation and not into my central receiving hub. This incoming receiving hub now is central and balanced in between my existing operations and my future operations.
Okay, but if you had, so B1, B2, instead of C here, instead of D there, D here. Now you have all this open space, trucks come in, unload. This is where you want the trucks to get to, right?
So that impacts existing parking and then additional to existing flow of how the material would flow from beginning to back like it is today in this operations. So it would be, material would have to go this way, then this way, and end up finished goods in two different locations. That would be very difficult to explain through.
So you're saying there's finished goods here and finished goods here, and they're both kind of being picked up together? Am I understanding?
Yeah, so they will both end up in the finished goods area, which is existing today. Yes, correct.
Okay.
Yeah, we would not move our current operations. This would tie in with our current process flow and operations.
Just to give context, I'm asking, I have no idea why the regulation was set up the way it is to pull things forward, but I have to assume someone smarter than me thought it was a great idea, and
It actually is a great idea, and we agree with that, but it just doesn't work when you have such a large building with existing conditions with an operation that's been set up over the past 7 or 8 years.
Excuse me, through the chair, wasn't that ordinance specifically more for commercial and not industrial?
To my recollection, and Dustin, maybe you heard something different, but I don't recall any discussion whatsoever of the, of either the light industrial or the heavy industrial district when we had that form-based code discussion.
I know anytime that we've had deviations from the pedestrian entrances, it's usually been met with either improved landscaping plans or something to kind of buffer that, and because really the improved pedestrian entrances mainly make it more walkable. But then we've kind of found ways, because we've had other businesses as well who have had security issues. A lot of them were the marijuana dispensaries.
Yeah, I'm talking more about the form-based code in general, the requirement that we push everything up to the front of the lot line. When we adopted that form-based code, we had a lot of discussion about how it would improve the CBD and prevent buildings from being too staggered back in the CBD and in the commercial districts. But I don't recall any discussion about application of the form-based code in the industrial districts at all. Councilwoman Weeks, do you recall any discussion of that at city council level?
I actually don't. I'm trying to think, I was trying to pull it together here, but I don't recall it. 2019?
And I can honestly say, I can understand why it wasn't necessarily an agenda item to consider it for anything other than commercial.
Well, that's the, I believe that was largely the purpose of the form-based code, was to improve the CBD and improve consistency in the commercial districts. And we had some discussion of how it would impact mixed use as well. But I question whether the form-based code was intended to apply to the industrial districts in this way.
Through the chair, for me, it's pretty clear, at least the intent of the frontage is to beautify and to make the commercial district more uniform, bring it up to the street. As a lot of downtown areas are, it helps to expand the reach of downtown out. But in this circumstance, I think forcing an industrial building to be closer to a park, or even to basically to any residential frontage, I don't see any time. Like if I lived across, I would want parking as a buffer above anything else, especially not being closer to the actual loading operations would be pretty disruptive. So I don't think this is the intent of that at all. So that's my opinion, at least.
Through the chair, I would like to know a little more about the activities that would be occurring in Building B2.
You're referring to this building here?
One before, right after you receive the material, it splits in two places. Yeah, it goes north.
Yeah, so currently today, the existing operations is forging operations, right? So that process would almost mimic what this process is, which is a forging operation. What that means is this billet gets cut to length. It goes through either an induction heating process or a convection heating process, and then goes into a forging press. What was touched on earlier, these presses are massive presses, right? The pits, like Richie stated earlier, 10, 12 feet deep. All these here, I mean, these assets pretty much, once they're in place, they don't move. They don't go anywhere. That's where they are for the rest of their life. So this process is our heating and forging process that would mirror the process on the other side of it today.
So if you were to visit the plant and imagine the material building and then see the operations to the south, you're actually going to duplicate it to the north, and it has to run through the same order of process to end up.
In that type of activity and that type of forging, sounds like it would put off fumes. Is that correct?
No, it's thermal. It's heat.
Okay.
Yes.
But it would seem like with the current ordinance that we would want that farther back from a neighborhood, not force it to be closer to a neighborhood, and have the only buffer be Wanda.
Yeah, there is the forging process. I'll go through it quickly for you. Yes, it does get heated up through both of those processes that we do. The dyes are also heated up. There is also a lubrication, water-based, it's a steam barrier type lubrication that we put on those dyes. So yes, there are vapors that are extracted through that process. Yes.
Around the time this form-based code was adopted, in a couple of years of their planning commission approved a substantial renovation of the Detroit axle plant on 8 Mile, which ended up being very similar to this proposed renovation here, with improvements to the surface parking in front of the building between 8 Mile's frontage and the building frontage, and with the
Big
large
addition.
expansion being on the back of the
Yeah,
building.
the huge.
That is correct, yes.
Yeah.
Which again makes me question whether the form-based
Yeah,
code
it's
is
all in the
intended
front.
to apply in a situation like this where you have a significantly sized industrial parcel of which we have very few in the city.
Through the chair, I actually think that's really the only comparable property
Right.
in the city is Detroit Access. Because I was looking at,
Size-wise,
when
for
we were
sure.
trying, when Kyle was trying to think of any other properties in the city, that's the only one that I can visualize that is of this scale with a single landlord, within the city.
And through the chair, if you do look at that other comparable property, it is laid out almost identically as to what they're requesting, with the parking along the road and a good circulation that goes around the whole back of the property.
So through the chair and through the city, we are all recognizing that this form-based code, it may or may not have been intended for the industrial. However, we have to deal with that today. How can we get beyond this today?
Well, in our opinion, we agree with you, we recognize, but that doesn't solve the problem, except for the fact that we believe that the board has the authority to grant relief if we can demonstrate the hardship, and it's a clear hardship. It's not ambiguous. It creates a person who invested money in a property can't use it for its purpose intended.
Money is not a hardship for our board, so we can't.
It's not a financial hardship. It's a matter of right. So I'll give you an example. May not be a good one. I don't know. If you buy a lot that's 50 feet wide, you bought the lot. You didn't buy it to build a park. Let's say you bought it because you wanted to build a house. So the intended purpose was to buy a lot and build a house. If a new ordinance comes out that says you can't build in this zoning district unless the lot has 60 foot of frontage, you didn't create the hardship. It wasn't self-inflicted, and it's not a financial hardship. It's a hardship because somebody's telling you that you can't do what you intended to do with the property that you bought that was perfectly legal when you bought it. So it's not self-inflicted, it's not financial, and it doesn't harm the neighborhood. As a matter of fact, complying, in our case, complying with the ordinance creates more of a hardship for the neighbors in the community in the way of noise and traffic and, encroaching on their private property than not complying. So we believe that for those reasons, that's why we're asking for you to grant the waiver, because we believe it's a legitimate hardship that requires relief.
I can appreciate all that you've said, seriously.
Thank
I
you.
just wanted to know from the city how we could go forward without a variance.
Oh, you mean you didn't want me to answer?
Good evening, good evening. Nice to meet
I do
everyone.
appreciate his words, it's good,
Nice to meet everyone, and thank you for being patient. I was waiting for the right time to jump in and note a couple things. So I'm Roger, the new Community and Economic Development Director. This is my second day.
Nice to meet you, Roger. Welcome.
So it's going to take me a little bit of time to get acclimated.
Trial by fire.
Yeah. But a couple things I want to note, which I think you guys are getting there already, so I'll just kind of repeat a little bit. But when I first heard about this on my first day, yesterday, my first inclination was that this was a variance request based on want, not based on need or hardship. So that was my first reaction of, this is just an I want type of thing. In our conversations this morning, we went through a presentation. I quickly changed that for a variety of reasons to, they do have hardships that exist, and actually meeting the code will cause health, safety, and nuisance conditions for the neighbors. So I think you guys have gotten there, but essentially, and I wish there was a little better picture here, if all these buildings were shifted up, said differently, there's one access point and they want to maintain one access point. If they could maintain this access point with this circulation up front, it provides a lot of opportunity to access the site. If these buildings are moved forward, that would require 2 access points. I'm concerned that with this access point down here, imagining the building was moved up, that any trucks coming in may not even be able to circulate in this area. If they were able to circulate, only one could circulate at a time, which would mean if there was additional trucks coming to the site, they'd be parked on Wanda. If they could not circulate in the site, that would require trucks to be backing in from Wanda, I think, which is an equity issue for the neighborhood, having to deal with that. So after looking at the site and how they want to use it, I think it's very appropriate for this. I wasn't here in 2019. I wasn't even here Friday, last Friday. So it'll take me some time to notice a couple things, but my first inclination is the same thing I think that people are catching up here is, does this really supposed to apply to industrial areas? The height limit here is 50 feet in this area. And so I'm just picturing, let's pretend this was a vacant site. Would we really want a potentially 50-foot tall building on the property line with a bunch of entrances? That probably would not look very good on a form-based design thought process. So to answer your great question is, we'll be looking at this. I don't know if there are many other sites. We were thinking Detroit Axle, so they might be having the same issue. But if you give us a little time to get acclimated, we may review it and realize that there are zone districts that it should not apply in. So I hope that answers your questions.
In the actual form-based ordinance, does it have the word commercial or industrial in it?
Kyle would have to answer that.
So it's not like a form-based code ordinance. It's rather we applied a lot of principles of form-based code for each one of our districts. So if you look in the ordinance, there's the MXD, mixed-use district, there's the commercial district, and then there's the industrial district. So it's kind of broken down into those categories. And in each one of those categories, there's a schedule of regulations, and that tells you how tall it can be, its setbacks, things like that. The setbacks more or less got erased in 2019. I think our residential districts still have them, but everything else, mixed use, commercial, industrial, that they all have this build to requirement instead.
Okay, so it's literally, the industrial has a build to clause. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Gotcha.
Absolutely.
Treated exactly like a commercial.
Gotcha. Is
district.
it because the commercial and the industrial are under one code?
Not necessarily.
Okay, I'm just asking because then it
Through
would
the
make
chair.
sense that it got lost.
Remember,
I think the only point that I would add about the application of these standards to industrial is that I remember a lot of discussion taking place during that time about the industrial district that is located north of 9 Mile along Hilton. And so I don't know, I didn't pull that up on the map. I don't know if that's the same zoning district.
It's light industrial, so this is M2. This whole industrial section south of 9 is M2. We call it general, but I mean, some cities call it heavy. Everything north of 9, so that's where, Liv is and Urban Rest, that's all M1, which is light industrial.
Okay, and do they have the same build to standards in the M1 as in the M2?
They do.
Okay, so I guess that was all that I was going to add, is that I remember a lot of the discussion about the industrial form-based standards being based on the conditions that were present, like north of 9, along Hilton to the west there, where if you look at those properties, as was stated, many of them are smaller, and many of those buildings are actually located closer to the property line.
At that time, there was a lot of discussion within Planning Commission about whether to allow live workspaces, for example, in light industrial, and we changed some of the ordinance that allowed for production facilities to have a retail component. So we had multiple meetings where we discussed how big of a retail component they should be allowed to have, but still be in the light industrial district. Almost all of the discussion that went on around that time at the Planning Commission level was focused on those issues, because that was also around the time that we were finalizing the last master plan update, which was around 2017. And that was a big issue for the master plan update, was whether we were going to allow live workspace and more retail space in the light industrial.
Through the chair, I do want one clarification really quick, because we keep talking about the central access point along Wanda, but part of the plan is also doing that entrance connection to Wordsworth, which is an end street. So can I get kind of a clarification on, we said the central access was for security purposes. What does the entrance to Wordsworth do when it comes to security? Because now you have an additional access point. So is that going to be fenced off just like Wanda is and have additional guard? Is that going to be only accessible for exit? Like how does that change the flow of the site?
I'll just answer one part of that I don't think that's guaranteed at this point. So I don't want to say that it's a done deal. I think the city owns this land and we have to come to some agreement. It probably would improve circulation greatly, but that's not on the table just yet. But I think if it were, how would that affect your security?
Well, clearly, it would greatly improve circulation for fire vehicles. That's like one of the number one. But yes, it would be gated and it would have an access code just like we have now. Now, that doesn't happen. That gate doesn't open and close 400 times a day. It's typically open in the morning. There's security at night. But depending on who the occupant is back there, if it happens to be some entity that's related to the city, and they may want, because of the use of the particular operation, they may want to come in and out, but generally speaking, it'll be for fire access and maybe exit, unless, again, if it's a particular tenant and they want to bring dump trucks or salt or whatever, and they want to have a closer access to their yard as well as the building, then they would be able to use it that way. But none of this is cast in stone yet, because, I mean, we don't even have that access. It's something that's an ongoing working with the city, because the city owns one of the parcels that's the key to the creating the access.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that because.
But yes, it would have to be secure.
As part of the project, so I just wanted to make sure that.
Okay.
It wasn't, so thank you.
Thank you.
The chair. One other question I have for the city is that in your report, on the page that shows the aerial view of the parcels, it looks like their property, I don't know if it is, it appears like it's two parcels. Could you clarify if it's one or two parcels and if they are being required to combine them as a part of this process?
Yes, it is two parcels, and it will be combined as part of the site plan review process.
Any further questions for the applicant or for city staff by board members?
If I may add one last thing, Chair.
Sure, go ahead, Roger.
You initially had mentioned the 11-foot parking, 4-foot variance, and so I'm a little concerned about that. See what I could show here that would explain that. So the north parking lot looks like it may have existed at one time, but at this point it's just tailings and gravel. The southern part of that parking lot, which I'll do an aerial and show you, you can see it showing up a little bit. I think my concern is, can't see with the glare. My concern, if we're looking here, let me see if I can zoom in just a little bit, is you saw where the fence line was, and so if we push this back 4 feet, this will push all these spaces back, which may not allow clearance, which will push all these spaces back. So if I was going to make a recommendation, I would say if you're going to hold them to the 15 feet, I would recommend holding them on the north side, but then that might kind of jet out a little bit and not make sense. Just pushing it back 4 feet, and I don't want to lose parking spaces and circulation area. So I know that they are overparked a little bit, but what I would say, in my professional opinion, is if you were going to grant the variances, to grant the variance and then let us look at it through the site plan to see if we can actually provide the 15 feet. But I don't know if we've laid it out and can measure it right now. I'm just cautious on that. That makes sense.
What's the current number of parking spaces available on the parcel, and what is the required number of spaces?
Have you run the numbers for the entire proposed development? Okay. Kyle will speak to that.
I want to know that information, and Roger, while I appreciate the input, this is also a variance that is a much smaller variance that's much more easily replicated throughout the industrial district than the more significant variance, which is more closely related to the unique circumstance of this gigantic parcel. There are a large number of industrial parcels that have parking in the frontage that would probably like to push their parking way out to the sidewalk if they could. So I have more concern about that one being more easily replicated, frankly.
So I believe we have 361 spaces that would be required. Is that still accurate? Okay. Okay, so there's 361 proposed and 331 that are actually required.
Based on the plan, it looks like the driveway between the spaces that are closest to the proposed building and the first line of double parking to the east is about 4 times as wide as the drive lanes in between the spaces.
This.
Right.
I believe it's for the trucks, right?
Right.
That's accurate, and that's because the trucks circulate through there and have to back into the building.
Is it only one-way traffic in between the other spaces?
I believe there's two-way traffic in between the spaces, but the reason there's so much space from the building east to the first row of parking is for the trucks to maneuver.
Would taking 4 feet out of that space make it impossible for the trucks to maneuver in that aisle?
I mean, ultimately, I know we're not in favor of designing the dais, but I mean, I do think that there are some options here if we were to shift this out and kind of close up some of the gaps. I think there are some options. If the engineer agrees, I would defer to him. One-way lanes in our city can go down to 20 feet. So right now they're two-way with the 24. And I would defer to them if that was an acceptable design choice, or if that 60 can be cut by a few feet or not. I'd invite the architects and the engineers to confirm this, but
again, I think if that particular variance wasn't granted, it would be our job to figure out what to do, whether it would be to have some one-way aisles, or somehow we'll have to make it up. If it's important to this board that maybe that might be a bad precedent and you don't want to encroach on that, I mean, we'll figure out a way to make it work. If we can, have the right to build the addition in line with the existing building and leave, we'll make it work somehow.
Thank you. Discussion among the board. Does anyone have further comments among the board about the requirements for a variance, about the application of the requirements to this particular property? We've heard discussion of the hardship requirement. We've heard discussion about the fact that this is a unique parcel that is perhaps replicated only once in the city, over on the American Axle side. We've heard discussion of the nuisance issue and the traffic flow and how this could be impacted through various different designs. We've had discussion about the probable intent of the form-based code and whether this is something that is likely to fit in with the intent of the zoning ordinance. Is there anything else any board members would like to raise?
Through the chair, really quick, if I may.
Sure.
When it comes to the parking, you said it was 361 is what they're providing and 330 is what they are required to provide. Is that correct? I mean, to do the 15-foot setback, I mean, I'm not a parking engineer. I work in transportation, but just looking at that first row of parking, that's 42 spots. If you do the 15-foot setback, you could even make those in the parallel parking spots and still pretty much be close to your required parking for that, and still do the setback for that particular parcel. The only thing that I would still have a little hesitation on is to adhere to that 15-foot setback. You would have to look at Allied's parking as well. they may lose a spot in front of them because they're set for just as far as the rest of the parking is. But I think, though, it's doable with the property to still get the parking while doing the 15-foot setback.
That's what I was going for, and I didn't see it.
That'd be the same.
Are we treating the second variance sort of similar to how it'd be if you had a non-existing structure like a garage that just fell down over time? I mean, they've obviously had parking already there, so we're basically granting them a variance to improve the parking. I mean, it's not like they're adding pavement, there's already pavement there, they're just going to improve the pavement.
It's a good point. We do have some ordinance sections that do allow for rebuilding or improvement of a pre-existing non-conforming structure as long as you are not literally building the entire thing from the ground up again.
Yeah.
So that one, again, my feeling on it is it's hard to even consider that to be much of a variance since it's already an asphalt paved lot.
Right.
But, you know, everyone has to use their judgment on this.
But we do still have to vote on it, though?
We do still have to vote on it because it's a request that was made.
So through the chair, I guess that's the clarification. I guess it's along the lines of what I was trying to get earlier from city staff and just trying to understand. And I didn't pull up my computer's being slow, so I didn't pull up our landscaping requirements in a parking area in an industrial district. But my assumption is that a lot would have to change about the parking to meet current landscaping ordinances, unless we don't require that in the industrial districts like we do in other areas.
You know, off the top of my head, I do believe that it's fairly standard citywide. It's more or less just reviewing parking lot screening. So anywhere between parking and the right-of-way, we need some kind of screening. I think that's one of the biggest requirements and something that they would have to provide during site plan review. So that can be either some kind of small fence or hedge wall or shrub hedge, something like that. In addition, we do have the green belt, which I think you might be referring to.
Yeah, that's what I'm concerned about.
Yeah, and that's some kind of tree every 30 feet, which I do think might be out there. I don't know the conditions of the trees, because we can include the right-of-way in that. So that does exist there, and it would be something we would review during site plan review.
Okay, but we wouldn't be requiring landscaping within the parking lot based on the square footage?
So for that, I believe it's like 3 trees for every 25 parking spaces. Is that what you're referring to? Or like landscaped islands or something?
Yeah, within the, not in the streetscape, not along the front, but within the lot itself. Are we requiring them to landscape within the lot?
Yeah, there is some provisions in that in the zoning ordinance.
Okay,
I think,
and they will be required to meet those provisions?
Yes.
Okay, so then, thank you for the clarification. I guess then my comment would just be regarding the variance that's for the setback of the parking, is that I know that one of our requirements is to give the least variance that we can give to give the relief that's needed. And knowing that we're looking at an existing parking lot that essentially has to be entirely reconfigured, which I understand because we're not looking at a final site plan. That's what I'm struggling to understand, how I could possibly support a variance that I don't know. I don't have any way of knowing that's the least significant variance we can give to get them the relief that's needed. Did that make sense?
I think I understood what you're talking about.
If I may, through the chair, I've heard the summary Chair Williamson, that you kind of put together, which was very clear as to what we're faced up against here. What I'd like to hear are the concerns based on here at the board level, based on the concerns regarding this project. I'd like to hear kind of where everyone is at as far as the concerns about this, and I just want to just kind of compare. So if, anyone?
Oh, I can begin.
Okay.
One of my biggest concerns is that if we hold them to the 15-foot variance, that there will be additional traffic on Wanda. And that's right across the street from residential neighborhood and a park. And that's one of my concerns, is that with the activities going on at the facility, which could require vehicles to go back and forth, that would increase traffic on Wanda.
If we held to the 15,
If we held to the
correct?
15.
Okay. And additional?
What makes you think, though, that that would increase traffic?
Because they were speaking of the production process and the steps that it's required, and it sounded like vehicles that come in, we pull the map up, that there's going to be two parking lots, or there's going to be two locations of entrance of activities. So in this lower southeast corner, people would, the trucks entering would be for this activity, and then to the north, the back area would be for activities back there. But for BFA, it could require trucks to go from one area to the east to the west side of the building.
Yeah, if I could through the chair, I think there was a concern that, hypothetically, let's say there's a building that goes, there, like this is a building up here. Trucks coming in here, if they're trying to access the site, they might have some difficulty navigating this area, especially if there's more than one. So I think that's one of our concerns, is that there's going to be some backups or something like that onto Wanda.
Yeah, through the chair, you can tell, especially if you have trucks going to the very bottom of that property where that other business is. They're going to have to back in basically if you block off the rest of the access.
Well, you can see it pretty clear through the chair, on Google Maps, you can see they pull around and then they back right up to the 5 doors they've got. I don't know if you can show the street level view, if you can just drag over the guy and show down a little bit. Yeah, if you can kind of go south. And so they pull in and then they pull around to the left. Keep going south, please.
That's another business.
The 5 doors?
Yeah, those 5 doors, that's part of yours, isn't it?
That's Allied. That's another
Yeah.
business, yes.
Same building, but it's a different.
But
Is that what you were
one of the
talking about?
tenants, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I was mentioning their business.
So,
They still use the same access though, correct?
Yes.
So.
Then the other 2 at the back go around. Get there.
so actually, that brings up, again, through the chair. So would you, if there's no buildings in the front, are you saying you would have another cut? So you would have a second point, or you're saying you don't need it now as long as there's no?
Don't need it.
Don't need it, okay, gotcha.
That won't be blocked.
So there will never be a need for people to go back out to Wanda to go around. Got it. Just want to be 100% clear.
So if I may, through the chair, just kind of to reiterate, I heard one concern based on the 15-foot. So are there any additional concerns? I'm just trying to formulate what I'm kind of thinking here. Is the concern mainly that because this ordinance was made for commercial originally, and that and we make this variance request for industrial, that we'd have a concern, or is the concern based on the parking structure, the parking section here, that other businesses that are similar to size would want that same variance? I'm just trying to put it together here before we move forward.
Through the chair, I think that the unique circumstances is we've been told that there's not other parcels like this. So I think that is a big bearing on this. I think that at this point, if we were to give a variance, it would be specifically to this location and no other. What I'm saying is that because of its unique circumstances of the lot size, would probably be enough. I mean, we did give a variance to Axel, didn't we?
They didn't need one.
Oh, they didn't need one, okay. Okay. So that, to me, is the only thing I can say. If that's just one of the aspects of uniqueness and the hardships, I mean, we can detail all that in a proposal, variance. But we do have to do each variance separately. So if anybody's going to do any motions, you have to go one at a time.
Let's run down from the end of the table. Board Member Steidemann, do you want to lay out concerns or comments that you have?
Yeah, I'll go through my four. So on number one, I think I'm good with the sense, as long as we build into language that's very specific to a building of this size, and if we mess it up where two properties in the city can take advantage of what we do tonight, I'm okay with that. So if it's just this and Axel, fine. For surface parking, again, it's already there. It's kind of like if your garage falls down and we allowed you to rebuild a non-conforming garage. I feel like, to me, for some reason, that's similar in my head. Parking lot in the front. I'm sorry, I might have them backwards. Hold on. Is number 3 the one, the 15-foot variance? Number 3, the parking lot in the front.
Number 3 is the 15-foot.
Yeah, I think we should definitely go for that. Just build in a bigger buffer, because it actually, I like the idea that you brought up, you know, the trees and actually making it a little bit more nice looking from the front. Right now, it's very open, I guess. The one that I don't really have a POV on right now is number 4, which is the 10 access points. And it says access points, but I think you said you had at least 10 exit points. Is that correct? So when they say access point, does that have to be for a consumer to walk up and get into the building, or is an access point something that a firefighter would need to be able to get into a building? Or is an access point just something that people need to be able to escape from the building from? It's just, that's an interesting choice of words.
Through the chair, they're not talking about the building, correct? They're talking about the property line and that it's fenced off and that you need actual entrances.
No, it's the actual building. And the discussion when this form-based code was adopted was desiring to have more storefronts in a specific amount of frontage, as opposed to having like a monolithic front like a Walmart or a Target or something like that. Because the discussion on this piece of the form-based code, again, was undertaken strictly with relation to the CBD and with the commercial district.
Through the chair, if I could just clarify a few things. That's, what is it, variance number 3? The parking setback variance, I just want to make sure we're all talking about it on the same wavelength here. So it's a 15-foot setback, so you cannot put parking within that first 15 feet of the property. They have parking, I believe, 11 feet out. So the variance that they're seeking is a 4-foot variance, to be clear. It's not like a 15-foot variance. The other thing is that pedestrian access, it's, someone getting from the right-of-way, to the entrance of the building. So it's specifically like a full access. And it's just like you mentioned, imagine a retail frontage with these multiple sets of sidewalks all going up to different retail spaces. Think of the first floor of the Dot, something like that.
So it is not referring to the doors themselves, correct?
As I understand it, it's a little tricky to understand.
It's an entrance.
I think it's
an exit door technically doesn't comply, but what the applicant has said is that they actually do have more doors along that frontage. It's just that most of them are exit doors as opposed to entrances.
Sure.
Through the chair, the new construction piece, how many doors would actually be needed on that? Because the old one's existing, so you wouldn't need to add doors to the old one. How many would need to be added to this new?
Closing one.
It looks like it's 230 feet.
I believe we had one proposed on the east, but we also had 2 proposed on the north, because if you're in the space, you could exit to the north or to the east. we could easily have two on that new addition. One more northerly, obviously, and then the other one could be farther to the south. And again, just recall that they are above the grade, so they would have to have a landing and a stairway and a railing.
With that specific ordinance, with that specific variance too, the variance is to reduce the number of pedestrian entrances. So actually, the number of exit doors that they had on there, I guess that may be something that board members want to consider, whether or not you want to grant a variance that says you can only have one pedestrian entrance, if they're saying that they would add more exits. But the variance, I guess, would stay the same. It would still be a variance for 9 fewer pedestrian entrances.
But I guess, so my question is, the new building, it looks like it's 230 feet long, or from top to bottom, 230 feet. So you divide that into 75, you're basically getting 3 and 5 feet, so you'd need to have 4 doors. So the variance really they're requesting is only 3. They're going to have one there. They don't.
They're not
No.
entrances, though.
A pedestrian.
They're exits.
A pedestrian entrance is for a pedestrian to enter from the public right-of-way. So regardless of how many doors they place on the building, there's one entrance from the right-of-way.
Right, but what I'm saying is, I guess I'm not saying this clearly. I don't think they need a variance of 9 doors. I think they need a variance of 4 doors. Because the other one was already existing with the non-compliant door issue or walk-up issue or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, I see what you're saying, but I think because they're going through site plan review, the whole site has to comply, which is why they need the variance for the whole
Right.
length.
But is an access an entrance or an exit?
It's an entrance. The ordinance requires like this number of entrances per the amount of square footage.
Oh, I thought it
So
said
they
access.
It still has to be a variance to give them 9 fewer entrances. They could have 40 doors on the front of the building, but if they're all exit doors and only one of them's an entrance, they still need a variance. 9 fewer pedestrian entrances.
If I may, Chair Williamson, I think you said it well, is that the intent was that this was a building that was set to, and generally a commercial building where you want storefront entrances. On an industrial building that's already 236 feet back, probably the last thing you want to see is all these doors that no one's going to. I think we looked at the elevations earlier, which we did not provide to you, but if you look at the grade, there's one, I think, entrance. I thought there was actually 2, one lower and one higher, but there's a ramp going up, so if someone comes out, they can get a landing. So if we put doors and all that, there would have to be like a 3-foot ramp along the entire width of it. So I just don't think that requirement applies, or in concept, design concept applies to a project like this. I think you said it well.
I also wonder if a pedestrian is going to enter. I think it would only be.
They won't be allowed to in a site like
It would
this.
only be employees, as far as I know.
Yeah, so it's a weird, we'll take a look at this. This is a lesson tonight. We'll be taking a look at these codes as they relate to industrial. But we put the request forward as the city attorney asked us to.
Okay, and Reggie, you don't know this, but I'm the longest ongoing Board of Zoning Appeals person ever in the city of Ferndale, and it's over 20 years.
Okay.
We have never, ever had an industrial situation before. So this is all new to us, but especially to me.
Yeah.
I mean, gazillion meetings later, and we have never, ever had anything remotely like this.
Yeah, and as a staff member and longtime resident, I want to thank the applicant for what they've put into the community. And this is, I guess, a good problem to have. But lesson learned when applying a code to everything. Maybe we need to look at individual zone districts, tour around, bring some planning commission members with us and take a look a little more deep. Thank you.
Yeah,
I appreciate
one thing that I have noted during my time as liaison between Planning Commission and BZA, which I did for 5 years up until last year, is that typically when these ordinances are being adopted, and I discussed this with Justin and with Jordan, who both of whom are now gone. You are the new Justin and Jordan, now Kyle and Roger, so I'll raise this with you as well. When we have these ordinance changes, they typically are done at the Planning Commission level, at the City Council level. BZA members are generally not involved. This is a problem that arises when BZA members are not involved in the process. So I would strongly encourage that when we are doing ordinance changes going forward that are going to apply to the zoning ordinance, that BZA members be involved in that. Okay, thank you. Further comments? Dustin, did you have any more? You are also a planning or BZA member who's going to be voting on this as well, so why don't you give us your concerns?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'll make a quick comment about the whole pedestrian entrance debacle is, so if they were to even follow through and do a pedestrian entrance every distance as they needed to, they're not in a zone that has an ordinance that requires those entrances to even be unlocked and accessible. So then ultimately, it just becomes faux doors in a way that really aren't even entrances. So, I mean, so you can kind of make the argument that they could still comply, but still not really comply. So I think for the particular purpose of this building, what they're doing makes more sense. And again, I think the pedestrian entrance is more fitting for the commercial district. As for the other, variances they're asking for, I think the building, the Bill 2 line is kind of clear based on the flow, based on the use of the property, and again, saying there's no other properties aside from Detroit Axle in the city that really matches. I think that the surface parking lot being permitted in front of the building, again, I kind of understand that placement. If they didn't put it in front of the building, they wouldn't have adequate parking for the site. I do think they should, and they can easily adhere to the setback requirement for that variance. And then, again, I already talked about the pedestrian entrance.
Okay, thank you, Dustin. So we've got Steidemann, we've got Palmer, we've got Colson, we've got Hagford. Board Member Steidemann, by the way, it's section 24-363C, repairs to nonconforming use on any structure devoted in whole or part to any nonconforming use other than a single-family dwelling. Work may be done in any period of 12 consecutive months on ordinary repairs or on repair or replacement of non-bearing walls, fixtures, wiring, or plumbing to an extent not exceeding 25% of the current replacement value. So that's the ordinance section that you were thinking about. As long as it's not changing it more than 25%, it's generally permitted if you're fixing something that's already non-conforming.
The cost, couldn't it be more than 25% of full replacement?
Yeah, 25% of current replacement value.
Okay. So like if they blacktopped it and that was cheaper than 24% of ripping it up and putting in a whole new, that would be okay?
Yes,
Okay.
in theory, under the ordinance. So we have Monk.
Most of my concerns surround enforcing the ordinances as they're written on this particular business. Every single one seems to have a negative except for the landscaping setback, which I'm all for if it's possible and not going to impede parking. But I definitely would not want a building such as this up on the property line, especially when it's across the street from residential. And even in the case of if this was an empty lot and they were building a new one with the height restrictions, it seems unreasonable for any commercial, any industrial building to kind of follow what is clearly intended for public-facing businesses. And then also, I mean, looking at the entire city of Ferndale on a map, you can see this property from outer space. It's one of the biggest open spaces in the city. It's the only one left, and I think denying them these variances could have very negative effects unless you really want a big empty area for several years. I don't see what the positives of enforcing this would be, so that's my opinion.
Thank you. And Board Member Blazinski.
So I agree with a lot of what's said by the rest of the board members here. I disagree with any suggestion that they don't need to completely reconfigure and re-landscape the parking lot. I see the value as being related to the site as a whole, and so I definitely think that needs to be looked at, and I agree with our new CD director, Roger. I wish I could give you the benefit of allowing you to develop, not you, but allowing the applicant to develop the most beautifully landscaped and reconfigured, designed parking lot to then determine whether they truly need the 4-foot variance for the parking setback. But as it stands today, the burden's on the applicant to prove that that's the least significant variance that they would need, and for me, that's not met.
Right, so Councilwoman Leaks May, that's pretty much everybody. I will say for my own part, I do not believe that this ordinance, as adopted when we did the changes for the form-based code, was ever intended to apply to the heavy industrial section. Having participated in the discussions, having been present at all of them, I do not recall having one single discussion with anyone on Planning Commission as to how this was going to impact anything outside of the CBD or the commercial or mixed-use districts. So for that reason, I'm generally in favor of granting the significant variance, which is the 246-foot variance to allow them to avoid the build-to property line. I'm generally in favor of the surface parking variance because of the fact that there's already a surface parking lot there, and realistically all they're going to be doing is improving it and striping it. Like many others, I don't support the variance of allowing them to evade the 15-foot parking setback, especially because if you look at the south portion of the property, it looks like they're pretty easily meeting that 15-foot setback if you go down to the southern portion of the parking lot. And as far as the fourth variance request, the 9 pedestrian entrances, again, I think this is an example of the fact that this was never intended to be a code that should be applied to an industrial building, because I don't see how this would make sense for any industrial property. So I would generally support that one as well. And I hope you, Councilwoman, will bring these concerns to council for us as well about whether there should be an adjustment to the zoning ordinance that perhaps excludes the heavy industrial district from these form-based code changes. So it needs to be looked at. We need to revisit what the previously existing requirements were and think about maybe going back to the prior version of the code. For
As
heavy
I'm thinking
industrial.
about this, I'm thinking about the previous, I'm trying to think of the details, but it might have been a situation where another, I think it was the discretion of the Planning Commission. I think that was something that we had, that was something that we needed to go back to council as well, because it was a fine line.
Right, the Planning
Yeah.
Commission was proposing it, the Planning Commission was
Right.
recommending it.
Right.
So council has a lot on their plate.
Yeah, but I want you to know I did bring it back, and the attorney's going to look at that, because we need to
Thank you.
clarify that. I just wanted to say that, Mr. Denhow, your business is in Ferndale. You've been a great supporter of the city and a great partner to the city, and I've watched your business kind of grow. And I'm, yeah, you as well. Everybody's been holed up, I think, for a little bit, from what I'm hearing is that I personally am not opposed to this project, because I know that the reason why you're bringing it is because it would greatly impact the production of your business and the flow. You're growing into your business as maybe you didn't see it back then based on the ordinance, because there wasn't one, but it's affecting you now. So for that reason, I don't want to see your production cease for an ordinance that wasn't in place before you made your stake in Ferndale. From what I'm hearing is that variance request number 3, I'm pretty sure that I heard it state that if that's something that was a variance that wasn't approved, that you can work around that. Did I hear that correctly? Okay. I guess, based on the way that I'm feeling right now and everything that I've heard tonight as far as the concerns, prior to our motion, I will be thinking about variance number 3 a little more. But I'm thinking that the other 3 variances, because of the situation, I am likely to support taking note that there are discussions that need to be brought back to council regarding ordinances once again, so I seem to kind of get the bulk of these things, but that's okay. We want to do it right. So, and I appreciate Roger and you, Kyle, also stating your ideas as to how we can move forward and be collaborative and make this more of an inclusive kind of process. I'm sorry I've rambled, but I had to really think my way through, and I really needed to hear everyone's concerns because I wasn't feeling the same concerns. So I just wanted to just kind of get that impact, the feel of that. I've said enough.
With all due respect, can I just make one comment about the parking, the setback on the parking? Would it be possible, so the 15-foot setback presumably is because we want 15 foot of green belt and landscaping, and I said we'll make it work, and we will make it work, but excuse me, what I'd like to have you consider, if you would, is if we were allowed to encroach in the setback by 2 feet, but yet we would still maintain the 15-foot setback, because that way the car can overhang into the 2 feet, so you'd still have a 15-foot green belt, but yet instead of having 18 feet behind the curb, we'd have 16 feet. It might help with the layout, but yet it gives the board here the clear understanding that if we're granted a 2-foot variance, it'll still be green. It'll just allow the car to hang over by 2 feet. And then the only other comment I wanted to make is we will plan to make all the parking comply with the planning, whatever is required as far as number of green belt and sizes and all that. We don't plan to come back and say, oh, we want a variance for a number of trees. We plan to comply. The only thing the 2-foot variance would do is, again, it would stay green, but it would allow the car to overhang over the curb without burning up more of the parking, if that's something you'd want to consider. Thank you.
Kyle, my understanding is that the measurement for that setback for the parking is from the end of the asphalt or concrete to the lot line. Is that not accurate?
So the 15-foot setback for the parking would be from the lot line 15 feet in. What I think they have right now is 4 feet of green space and then a parking space that continues on from there. So that's why they're seeking that 4 feet variance. Does that make sense?
It's not exactly addressing what I'm asking. Because what it sounds like is that the applicant believes that they could actually have 16 feet of green space in between the lot line and the actual parking, but they still wouldn't be in compliance with the ordinance. I don't think that's the case.
Well, I think what you're suggesting is 13 feet of green space and then a 2-foot variance.
It'll be 15 feet of green space. So if your standard parking requirement is 18 feet, so 16 feet would be in the paved area, and 2 feet would overhang into the green, so that we would always have 15 feet of green space. But does that technically consider the setback? I don't know the answer. If it is, then we're good. If it isn't, then we need a 2-foot variance technically.
Yeah, I don't
It's just a
think you need a
technicality.
variance for that. I think you're talking about 15 feet from the lot line to the point where your paving starts.
That's all we ask. Yep.
Yeah, I don't even think you need a variance.
Yeah, that's correct. We do not need a variance. I do think the ordinance by right allows some overhangs in specific
Right.
situations.
Yeah, hanging over, if the nose of the car hangs out over green space.
So then the stripe of that particular stall would be a 16-foot stripe with the understanding that the car would overhang 2 feet and it doesn't require a variance, and that's fine. Then we don't need that variance.
The chair, I think it's up to city staff. I mean, if we have an ordinance stating that a parking space needs to be 18 feet, then you'd be, I mean, I don't know, city staff has to tell if a 16-foot length parking space is allowed, because I don't have any issue with you shortening your parking spaces. Some cars are smaller, but the city probably has an ordinance for that.
Yeah, we do.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then a 16-foot space is not allowed.
No, the 16-foot space is allowed as long as there's, I think it's at least 7 foot of, green space or something beyond it. As long as there's enough room for the car beyond it, plenty of room, it's not going up against the wall. We do allow, we call it a 2-foot overhang. So I think everything that Mr. Atto just described would be in full compliance for site plan review.
Yeah, that's what the ordinance says. It says space length may be reduced by up to 2 feet if an unobstructed overhang of not less than 2 feet is provided, such as a landscaped area or sidewalk.
Perfect.
So it's 18 foot, but you can have a 2-foot reduction if there's an unobstructed overhang. This is section 24-224.
That's incomplete.
Yeah. Through the chair, I want to bring up one thing. I'm not recommending anything, but other applicants in the past have tabled variance requests to get further information. So if you were to say, I mean, you've heard, maybe it doesn't sound like it's going to be a 4-0 vote. So if there's something you wanted to take back to the drawing board to keep it open, because I think once we vote, it's closed for a year. Is that correct? So if you want to go back and work things out and see if you can make everything work, and if you can't, have this still open, then perhaps you might want to table just this one variance. You do have that option.
If you're asking our opinion, we prefer to have a decision, and we're committed to making it work. And if we lose the parking setback variance, we will make it work somehow. We prefer to have a decision on the other 3, even if we believe that particular one.
We would decide on the other 3. If you just pulled back one, we would not decide on that one. We would still decide on the other 3.
You have 4 requests.
So you have 4 different separate variance requests.
I see. I thought you were suggesting that we table.
No, I'm suggesting that you may want to table one to give yourself more time to figure out if you want to come back down.
It sounds like it's possible good option if it's only dealing with the one parking setback 15-foot variance. If we table that one, it might make sense.
Sure, it's up to you. I think you've got a sense at this point how the board feels about that one, but you can take it off the table now, and then if you decide you want to bring that again later, you can. If you decide not to bother with it, then you don't have to.
Let me say for the applicant, so they're offering, I think, based on what I'm hearing, to approve the 3 main requests, but table the setback request for parking if you'd like to pull that now. And I would just say, we'll give it, if it's not before you in 60 days, then it's expired, or it's however it goes. But no.
We would still vote on the other 3 variances. You have 4 separate requests pending. You don't have to have us vote on all 4 of them. You can pull the one specific variance request for the 4-foot parking setback. All the other 3 variance requests will get a vote tonight.
If you could ask the chair.
Through the chair, if I may, just, I don't want to speak for everyone in the planning commission, but I can say that other projects where we've had, whether it be parking on the adjacent property or something along the sidewalks, that has been a contentious discussion that we've always had, and we've always kind of resulted in really buffing up, landscaping and green belt and whatnot. So I won't say that the planning commission would not approve if you guys try to shrink that space, but any space that you provide for a green belt helps the approval of the project. And again, I don't want to speak for everyone on the planning commission. I just know in previous conversations, it's always been kind of a point of discussion, and it sounds like the 15 feet really isn't that huge of a deal. It's just you gotta have to go back to the drawing board a little bit to finesse it. Do you want to gamble the entire project off of that?
No, we don't.
So that's my sense.
Thank you, Dustin. And of course, they could go to planning commission with a proposal that they're gonna do a 16-foot space with a 2-foot overhang, and it's all gonna be green belt, and they wouldn't even need a variance for that if they didn't want to.
Exactly.
So,
Well, we appreciate the offer to table it, but I think we'll proceed.
okay.
But thank you for the offer.
Just to make, if I may, just to make sure I'm clear through the chair. So we are then making a motion on all 4 variances now, and one's not being pulled, even if you just wanted to scratch it? Is that what I'm to understand?
Yeah, they want to proceed on all four
All 4?
of the requests. So
Okay.
we would need a motion for each of these and a vote for each of these variance requests separately. So if, you know, at this point, I would entertain a motion on any of these variance requests. My preference would be that motions proceed in the order that these are listed in the packet, in the staff report. I think that would be easier to make that, to go through these. But if anyone is inclined to make a motion either way on any of these variance requests, I'd entertain a motion for any of them.
Through the chair, if I could, we were discussing, the membership. We did review section 24-422 for the BZA. BZA consists of 7 members. We do have 2 alternates. As we understand it, the alternate only votes when they are being called to serve in place of a regular member. So as we understand it, Commissioner Hagfors would not be voting for these items tonight.
Okay.
Because we
Okay.
have enough.
Yeah, I guess we always had our liaison to planning commission was always a full member of the BZA in the past. So
Commissioner Hagfors, does that make sense to you? I think when you accepted your nomination, we did discuss that this was an alternate. I specifically remember that being brought up.
Yeah, I mean, this is my first time being at a BZA in this position, so, but yeah, I'm fine following through with that and having
Sure.
the BZA 7 vote.
I trust your judgment, Kyle and Roger. I believe you guys.
Through the chair, would that change if a council member recused themselves and/or abstained from a vote?
Yeah, it does say be called to serve in case in which the regular member has abstained for reasons of conflict of interest or due to an absence of a regular member.
If I may, through the chair, you said council member. Did you mean board member or you meant council member?
Wondering the same thing.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure.
Sorry, I meant
All right.
BZA board member,
Okay.
sorry.
All right.
Sorry.
She's the only council.
Right.
You don't have to.
Are you trying to accuse
All
her?
right.
Right, no,
I was just wondering. I was like, what am I missing here?
sorry.
Okay. All right.
Hey, Raymond, what are you gonna do?
Am I looking? No, that's not it. Based on all of the findings?
You have to say all the findings, all 6.
You can state with all findings as listed in the staff report dated May 6, 2022, page 7 or page 3. You don't have to say, you don't have to recite every one of them. If
Okay.
you're going to make a motion.
All right, we'll try it. I'll probably botch it. Quick question. is there any chance that the size of your building can change? I'm gonna put some language in about a 130,000 square foot building, just to limit it to a very select few properties.
Is there any chance that the size of
Fine, is there any chance it
the
could
sum,
shrink?
the sum of all the buildings, you mean?
No, those three buildings that are set back, the three that are connected, is, I believe they are 46,000 square feet, 46,000 square feet, and 40,000 square feet combined, and then, so combined, it's 134,000, correct?
Correct.
So, is that gonna change, is that gonna shrink?
Shouldn't.
Okay. Okay, so then,
It might be in phases, but it won't, the size won't change.
So it could happen. I mean,
No, he said the size won't change.
yeah,
Yeah,
I
they
just,
still
I
need
want,
Your specific question,
Yeah.
will the size change? He's stating, no, it's not going to.
yeah, as we've done in the past, I want to put some kind of criteria that makes it very hard for someone else to use this decision to influence their decision. So if anyone can think of something better than a building that's 130,000 square feet,
Well, it's size.
Opened
It's-
up.
It's the lot size too.
Yeah,
Unique
I think
circumstance.
the lot size.
Yeah.
we know what the lot size is?
Well, it accommodates that type of building.
I just
want
want,
some specifics.
yeah, something specific to put in here so someone can't come in and do the same thing with
Lot
something
size
a
on
quarter of
that
the
one.
size.
The site is 22 acres. I don't know if there's other 22 acre sites. You could say maybe if the site has a minimum of 20 acres, does that make sense?
Okay, I'll just say 20 just to be safe in case it's just under 22. All right, so I'll motion that the Board of Zoning Appeals approve the dimensional variance, variance number 1, application to allow a variance of 246 feet from the required 0 to 15-foot build-to line and 14% of the primary frontage width from the required 80% at 965 Wanda, Sidwell numbers 2535-176-017 and 25-35-176-018. After a public hearing was held and set and published for the state and place, the motion is accompanied by the following findings, all findings 1 through 6 on page 4 of the BZA staff report, with the additional requirement that this only be allowed on a property 20 acres or larger.
And if I may, through the chair, did we want to add something? Did you mention something about the greenery in there already?
Which one?
Well,
Oh,
that's
you
the
know,
planning
never mind,
commission. That's the
never mind. I'm sorry.
Yeah, I'm
ahead
just
of-
doing, I'm just
ahead
doing
of
the
myself.
first one,
I'm ahead of myself.
just doing the first one, then, okay.
All right, we have a motion on the table by Board Member Steineman. Do we have support?
Support.
Okay, we have support by Board Member Coulson. Any discussion on this motion, or are we prepared for a vote? Hearing none, let's do a roll call vote on this.
Board Member Plazinski.
Yes.
Board Member Monk.
Yes.
Board Member Coulson.
Yes.
Board Member Williamson.
Yes.
Board Member Palmer.
Yes.
Councilwoman Leaks May.
Yes.
And Board Member Steineman.
Yes.
That motion passes. Congratulations, gentlemen. You have your 246-foot setback variance. Thank you. Take a look at what else we have on the agenda here.
Think.
All right, so
That's the design.
I'll motion variance 2, that the Board of Zoning Appeals approve the dimensional variance application to permit surface parking between the building and frontage at 965 Wanda, Sidwell numbers 25-35-176-017 and 25-35-176-018. After a public hearing, quick question, when those are combined, will one of those numbers be the number that remains, or will there be a new number? They're combining those two properties correctly, or correct?
I think they are, but this is currently how they are.
Yeah, you can just do it
So
as.
right now, it needs to
Okay.
apply to the existing
Okay,
parcels.
then -018, after a public hearing was held, set and published for this date and place, a motion is accompanied by the following findings, all findings 1 through 6 on page 5 of the BZA staff report, with the additional requirement that all, what did you call it, Leah? or Board Member Blazinski,
The unique circumstance of the property
no,
being
the,
that.
like the greenery, the tree, what was the word you used?
Oh, that's related to the variance number 3, but I don't believe we need to put any language in because it's already in the ordinance. What the
Yeah,
property
next,
is.
okay,
Yeah.
then
So for, no,
all
don't worry about
findings
that.
1 through 6 have been met.
All right, we have a motion on the table again by Board Member Steidemann.
I'll support that one.
All right, supported by Leaks May. Any discussion on this, or are we prepared for a vote? Hearing none, let's do a roll call vote on this.
Board Member Blazinski,
Yes.
Board Member Monk,
Yes.
Board Member Coulson,
Yes.
Board Member Williamson,
Yes.
Board Member Palmer,
Yes.
Councilwoman Leaks May,
Yes.
Board Member Steidemann.
Yes, although I didn't put a clarification on size on that, so this one's a little more open-ended,
Well,
fortunately.
that's all right. Again, gentlemen, congratulations, you have your existing surface parking. No need to rip out the asphalt. All right, we have 2 more variance requests up for tonight. Variance 3 on the parking setback, variance 4 on the pedestrian access. Anyone prepared to make a motion on one of these variances?
All right, let's go for the hat trick. I'll motion that the Board of Zoning Appeals on variance 3 deny the dimensional variance application to allow a variance of 4 foot from the required 15-foot parking setback, Sidwell numbers 2535176-017 and 2535176-018, after a public hearing was held and set and published for this date and place, and the motion was accompanied by the following findings. A practical difficulty does not exist in that conformity. Number 2, with the strict letter of the ordinance is unnecessarily burdensome in that the applicant does have the available alternatives that would allow for all applicable zoning requirements to be met.
Right, thank you. Motion to deny on the table by Board Member Steidemann. Any discussion or support?
I'll support.
Supported by Board Member Palmer. Hearing no discussion, we'll do a roll call vote on this one.
Board Member Blazinski,
Yes.
Board Member Monk,
No.
Board Member Coulson,
No.
Board Member Williamson,
Yes.
Board Member Palmer,
Yes.
Councilwoman Leaks May,
I think that for this one, yes.
and Board Member Steedman.
Yes to deny, yes.
All right, motion passes. Gentlemen, 15-foot requirement will continue to apply. We have one final variance request, which is the variance seeking a reduction in the number of, and I will comment on this, the significant number of pedestrian entrances that are required for this frontage under our form-based code.
All right, let me give it a try. Why not?
All right.
I move that the Board of Zoning and Appeals approve the dimensional variance application to allow a variance of 9 pedestrian entrances from the required 10 pedestrian entrances at 965 Wanda, Sidwell numbers 2535-176-017 and 25-35-176-018. After a public hearing was held as set and published for this date and place, the motion is accompanied by the following findings listed.
And Councilwoman Leaks May, you're referring to the findings listed on page 7 of the staff report.
Thank you.
Thank you for the clarification.
Second.
Supported by Steidemann. Do we have any discussion on this? Hearing none, let's do a roll call vote.
Board Member Blazinski,
Yes.
Board Member Monk,
Yes.
Board Member Colson,
Yes.
Board Member Williamson,
Yes.
Board Member Palmer,
Yes.
Councilwoman Leaks May,
Yes.
Board Member Steinman.
Yes.
All right, that motion carries. Gentlemen, congratulations. You don't need to put 10 extra pedestrian entrances into your building.
Yeah.
You're all set. We appreciate your bringing these issues to our attention. We appreciate your time and your patience with us tonight. This was an interesting issue to work through, and I think that you've helped to spotlight some probable revisions that we need to make in the application of this form-based code.
Taking the time to understand hardships and consideration, so thank you very much. Understanding and presenting it accordingly.
Congratulations on your new, improved, and expanded facility.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, good luck to you. Yeah.
All right, that takes us through our regular agenda to administrative items. Administrative items, I would say administrative item number 1, we have a new Community and Economic Development Director, Roger, who has now introduced himself to us all. Roger, thanks for being with us tonight. Anything else you want to tell us about yourself?
I mean, not really, but a little bit.
You've had enough already?
I've explained it to many people so far, but I'll just tell you a brief history. I grew up in Ferndale, so I spent my entire life here. Grew up on Troy Street in Manatee, and then went to Michigan State. In 2006, I went to Colorado. I worked for a very progressive city called Lafayette, which is 9 miles east of Boulder, 12 miles north of Denver, probably maybe even more progressive than Boulder. It's a very progressive community that had high standards and a way of always pushing the envelope and getting better and better. I think this is Kyle and I's first time at the BZA, so we appreciate you being patient with us. I think there are things I would have buttoned up a little bit better had I known. I think I do appreciate the applicant for their investments in the community and also for highlighting these issues. I think Kyle and I have talked, and Kyle has a number of things he's noticed that could be maybe improved in terms of code or definitions or things like that. So I think it'll just take time. So if you be patient, and I heard you loud and clear, it is important to bring the BZA along when we're making code changes, dimensional standard code changes, that you guys may be able to think of issues in advance because this is what you do. You sit here and hear these cases. And also want to appreciate the alternates, especially for sticking through the whole night. Thank you.
Thank you, Roger. And to the alternates, we appreciate you both as well. Dustin, it was invaluable to have feedback from the Planning Commission. And as I've mentioned before to other city staff members, we are the body that is charged with interpreting these ordinances. So for us not to have a part in the actual development of the ordinance, it doesn't make a lot of sense when we're the ones who have to say what it means. So I appreciate your recognition of that, and I look forward to us at least being able to put our 2 cents in as these are developed going forward. Kyle, thanks for your time.
Yeah.
We appreciate that. Any administrative items from the city side?
No, we do not have any.
All right, board items, I have none. It is 8, actually this took us less time to get to than I anticipated, which is great. No, it is 9.
Keep us?
It is 9:30 something. Okay, it's an hour later
See
than
the
I thought.
big clock?
So I have no board items.
If I may, through the chair, I just wanted to
Councilwoman
state
Leaks May.
something. To Roger and Kyle, I just want to say that I was very impressed. You two hit the ground running. This was your first meeting, and I think you did it really well. I mean, you came up with ideas to form a more collaborative process between BZA, including us more in the process, and I'm really appreciative of you, so thank you very much. Leah, I appreciate you hanging out here and listening to this. It's important, and it shows your dedication, so I appreciate it. And thank you, Dustin, for
Thank you.
your input. All right.
This reminds me of when I was on a jury. No, I'm not kidding you. Because my initial reaction was that he was guilty. And until we deliberated, he really wasn't. So the same thing on this, I thought they could just move the building forward. But it doesn't make sense now. So I think it's great that we have these meetings.
All right, hearing no further board items, it is now 9:39 and 42 seconds. We will adjourn the meeting.
But not in time to catch Dairy Queen because it closed.